Um, welcome to the recording of the Talk Show for Talkers once again. We're delighted to see you here, and as you can see from those on screen, we have a guest tonight, today, this afternoon, this morning, whatever time of day it is that you're watching this. And we're about to go for episode 1. So let's go to Ted and Paul, and I'll give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, Toastmasters, would-be Toastmasters listeners and friends. You're very welcome to the Talk Show for Talkers on irishtalkers.com. Our email address is info@irishtalkers.com. You can also find us on Facebook as the Talk Show for Talkers. We welcome your comments, your questions, and feedback. Indeed, we look at these as evaluations. We use them, the advice you offer and the questions you ask. You can also listen to previous shows on our website, irishtalkers.com. And we also publish the Public Speaking Weekly. And this is a roundup of links from the internet. It's all about Toastmasters. It's about public speaking. It's about confidence, leadership. So look out for the newspaper link on our website. My name is Ted Malamphy, and I'm joined again this week by the prolific, personable, persuasive, sometimes passionate Paul O'Malley.
Listeners, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here listening to us today, and I hope you're going to get great value out of this episode.
Thank you, Paul. And on today's show, we will have a thought for the week. We will have a word for the week. We have a very special guest, and that special guest will be introduced to you in episode 2. So you better make sure you tune in tomorrow to listen to the wise words of this special guest. I'm going to bring you my quotation because it's a little bit lengthy, and it's quite possible that it will offer us the opportunity to have some nice discussion, Paul and I. So an expert is someone who, over many years, manages to remain confident enough to keep trying and humble enough to keep learning. So an expert is someone who, over many years, manages to remain confident enough to keep trying and humble enough to keep learning. And that was given to us, Paul, by the writer of Atomic Habits, again this week, James Clear. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm full of admiration for James's opinion. I think the idea that every so-called expert is humble is preposterous. I think we have all heard of or run across experts who are a long way from being humble and who are arrogant and high-handed and superior. And they may actually be superior in their own field. But I would love if every person I regarded as an expert was indeed doing their best to be humble and keep on learning. Wouldn't that be a lovely utopian world, Ted?
It would actually, Paul, and what you gave us was a very clear definition of what an expert is and what an expert is not. Because when you said in your opinion that some of the experts that you know, well, the experts that you know, obviously the people who are arrogant and highbrowed, it depends on how or who gave them the title of expert. Because I think experts, to remain an expert and to qualify as an expert, would mean that you would have to be humble and you would have to continue on learning. That every day is a day for learning, every day is an opportunity. And if you lose that humility, then I think you lose the benefit of being spoken of as an expert.
Ted, supposing you were into fly fishing and you were the acknowledged greatest champion in the world at tying flies. Everybody thought you were the number one, including yourself and me. But when you went out there in competitions and people came over to you and said, wow, that's a magnificent fly that you have there, Ted. How did you make that? You said to them, buzz off and practice for the next 20 years and you'll learn a quarter of what I know. Supposing that was you, would you be still the world's greatest tyer of flies?
That's an excellent question, Paul, and I'm going to get up out of my seat and show you something, and then I'll give you the story.
Now, listeners, at this point in the podcast, you're unable to see what Ted is doing. So am I. But he's going to show us. We're recording on Zoom, and he has forgotten, just as a matter of interest, that you can't see things when you're using one of these backgrounds on Zoom. And now we have a photograph here of Loch Mask. Now, Loch Mask has nothing to do with COVID. It has nothing to do with pandemics. It is a lake in the west of Ireland.
And unfortunately, Paul, fortunately, it's a glass-covered little cabinet that is holding 3 flies that are regarded as killer flies on Loch Mask.
Well, you know, listeners, those of you who are
and you make out the flies, Paul.
Those of you who are naturally kind towards all living creatures, please don't regard Ted Melanphy as a killer. It isn't really the kind of reputation he wants, even though he's shown the killer flies that he probably won when he was Irish, close, tie, flying tie. Anyway, a person used to catching salmon with dry fly.
Well, what I must say, Paul, and what I must explain is that my dear departed dad, was a fantastic angler, and he fished on the lakes of Killarney very often, and he also fished on Loch Mask. And I have 2 brothers who are avid anglers, and both of them are fly tyers. And it's my youngest brother gave me this as a Christmas present, and he has 3 flies inside it that he has tied up himself. And the reference to killer flies is that these are the flies who are guaranteed to catch you the finest trout in Loch Mask. And the trout in Loch Mask would be up to 2.5 pounds in weight. So a fantastic specimen of fish. So the killer isn't actually the fly itself, it's what the fly does, that he attracts the juiciest and the most delicious trout that would ever like to jump on an atterfly and be hooked by my brother and brought into the boat and then driven from the west of Ireland to the south of Ireland, where it will be given to me, where I can cook it and put it on my plate for dinner.
Well, Ted, you have just made what I would think could be fairly described as a statement that appears to be opposed to common sense. In other words, that a killer fly is not a killer, and yet is probably true. Now, that's what a paradox is. A paradox is a statement that appears to be contradictory or opposed to common sense, and yet is probably true. That's one of the definitions of the word paradox. Paradox. Listeners, we give you every week a word of the week designed to help ourselves and you to broaden your range of vocabulary so as to have more impact when you're speaking. Something that sounds self-contradictory or a self-contradictory statement that seems to be true, or an argument that has logic, which comes from self-contradictory things. Let me give you an example. Here's one. For the actors on a stage, the goal was a paradox. Pure emotion produced on cue. Now, producing pure emotion on cue is a contradiction, isn't it? Because real emotion produced on cue. An actor, if they're producing emotion on cue, it's hardly what we regard as real. And here's another one. Again and again, Ted Malanphy returns in his writing to the paradox of a woman who is superior to the men around her by virtue of social class, though considered inferior to them on account of her gender. On the one hand, she's superior because she comes from a higher, more wealthy social class, whereas at the same time, she's considered to be inferior. Obviously, this is sexist to them on account of her gender. So that's paradox, a contradiction. Ted, what century, here's your weekly quiz. In what century was the word paradox, did the word paradox first enter the English language?
15th century.
That's the best answer you've given in months. It was only 1 century out.
That I would have said 16th.
Yeah, it was actually in the wait a second now. In 1540, did you say, Ted?
I said the 15th.
In the 15th century.
Yeah.
Right. So 1540. Oh, my head has gone soft. What century is 1540 in?
That's the 16th century. I was a century out.
Yeah, well, there you are. But that's why I'm complimenting you on your astuteness and your improvement. So continuous improvement, and well done, Ted.
And thank you, Paul. And paradox was the word of the week.
It was word of the week.
Yeah, lovely word. And thank you for the lesson in rhetoric.
There we are.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. Paradox is a word I'll have to remember, because I'm sure we've managed to get ourselves into paradoxical situations, Paul, you and I, from time to time, as I get my ankles in a twist. I'm going to say something else, but it may not be appropriate for young ears. And that brings us to a nice conclusion for episode 1. And please come back again tomorrow, because we have a very special guest who is going to appear on this show as our guest. So look forward to that.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you for that.
Moira keeps the time, Philippa, and she tells us when we're running over time.
And sorry about that, because I didn't see the time, actually. I didn't see I was just assuming that the way you were speaking, Paul, we had come to a natural conclusion.
Well, Ted, why do you not have us all 4 on screen?
I have.
Well, then you should see the timing card.
Yeah, I'm after sorting that now. I have it all along the top now, and I have the speaker pinned.
Okay.
Can I shut up, Ted?
Yeah, that sounds good.
You're the boss from then on, because you bring us to the conclusion, don't you?
Yeah, well done. And I kind of took my cue from you there, Paul.
Okay.
Anyway, that's it, Philippa. That was episode 1.
Yeah, well, I thought that was great.
Okay, so
Moira takes out all the
Well, we're now going to
Bad words and the ums and ahs and all those. She takes out some of those.
Okay, Ted, just watch paper shuffling on your desk because that comes over on your microphone. Okay, we're ready in episode 2, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome, Toastmasters, would-be Toastmasters listeners and friends. Delighted that you are giving us your ear today, because I reminded you yesterday we have a special guest, and this special guest comes to us from one of our sister or one of our brotherly districts. This lady comes from District 91, and this lady is a member of Shilling Speakers. Her name is Philippa Gray, and she fills the posts of treasurer and secretary, and is also co-presenter of the brand new Shilling Speakers Club podcast. Philippa, you are very welcome to the Talk Show for Talkers.
Thank you, Ted. I'm delighted to be here.
And we're delighted to be with you here, and we might be having a chat about your brand new podcast show in another episode. But Philippa, I'm going to explore your path so far in Toastmasters. Now, you are a member of Shilling Speakers. Are you a member of some other clubs?
No, not yet, Ted.
Okay, well, that's good. So you devote, and I suppose when you have two roles such as treasury and secretary, plus co-presenter of this new podcast, I think one is probably enough, even at the moment. So well done. And when did you join Toastmasters?
Back in November 2019 at Shilling Speakers' very first meeting. So I'd known that I wanted to join Toastmasters for a while, and when a local club was set up, I just jumped in.
Oh, well done. That was superb. So you were one of the founding members of Shilling Speakers.
Yes, that's right.
And you're after building a fantastic reputation for yourselves already, so well done on that. So, Philippa, I hope you won't be offended if I refer to you as a baby Toastmaster.
Not at all. That's actually.
Oh, well done. Well done. And what would you feel has been the greatest benefit to you so far of being in Toastmasters?
Oh, it's a great learning experience. Everything you experience in Toastmasters turns into skills that you can apply in other aspects of your life.
That's a fantastic answer, and I like that answer. And that's a little bit like what Margaret Page is speaking about in this month's magazine about the benefits of Toastmasters. And what has been your biggest Toastmasters challenge?
The thing I find hardest is getting involved in competitions, and not as a competitor, but I've been in the judging team a few times, and I've foolishly volunteered to be contest chair in a few weeks' time, and then I read the manual and thought, oops, done it again. Not an awful lot to chew, but
well, you haven't actually, and you've identified something. One of the wonderful things about Toastmasters, you put your hand up for something not knowing exactly what's involved, and then when you delve into it and see what is involved, you're not unique there, Philippa. That's what we all did. And we said, oh my God, what am I after taking on here now? And when you look at it, particularly the contest chair, there's a lot of work, but that's where you're going to go, and that's where you're going to learn so much. And that is one of the things when you take on a role such as that. That is a fantastic stepping stone to your leadership, and it's another arrow for your bow.
Yes.
So congratulations. So is it your contest chair for your own club contest, or?
Yes, that's quite enough of a challenge.
Oh yeah, well, we'll all have to go to that, Philip, and I'll have to make sure that either you or Antonia will send on the invitation, and we'll be looking at you, because we might be proposing that you take on one of the the higher roles again, either the area, the division, or even a district contest chair. How would you like that?
Oh, I'll get the club chair one sorted
You're a
first.
wise woman. Well done, yeah. But that is really where you challenge yourself, you test yourself, and that brings out everything in you as a Toastmaster. Since you're a baby Toastmaster, as I referred earlier, is there anything there that you would like to see changed in Toastmasters as an organisation?
I don't think so at the moment. Often I'll think, oh, this is a problem, and then I'll find it's just that I haven't understood what's going on in the background. It is a big organisation. It's very well run, and you are encouraged to stretch yourself. So means you aren't always finding out what you need to know before you need to know it.
And you're so right, actually. And again, one of the wonderful things about Toastmasters is the support that you get. That you can't put your hand up for things that under other circumstances you would never have put your hand up. But Toastmasters gives you this opportunity, and that's what it's all about, And I've often said to people that when you're a Toastmaster, you see things in people that the people themselves never realised that they had, and that's what helps us to grow.
Yes, definitely.
That's the wonderful thing about it. And what keeps you coming back to Toastmasters?
The learning experience and the fun of it. I thought, I'm going to learn, I'm going to make this work. I was thinking at first, what have I got myself into? But as I've just kept a member, kept doing stuff, I've been making friends, having a lot more fun each meeting. As you gain confidence, you realise how to enjoy yourself, how you can relax, what's allowed, what is not a good idea. And so I came along for the learning, and I'm staying for the good company.
Excellent. And you've been unfortunate in that when you joined Toastmasters, you didn't have a huge amount of experience, and suddenly we found ourselves not being able to visit the club in person. How do you think that your club, and how did you cope with that? The fact about using Zoom or whatever other kind of platform you were using?
I've got a technical background. I love Zoom. Give me some technology, I just want to play with it. But our founding president just grabbed the opportunity and did a brilliant job of getting out, going to meetings on Zoom all around the world and inviting people back to Shilling Speakers and creating a truly international club. So much so that we are now purely online. We'll probably never have a formal meeting in person, because what's the point? We've got members in Mexico, members in Ireland, all points in between. So we will have the occasional ad hoc extra meeting, just meeting up with the few of us who actually live in Havant, where we started. But no, we've thrived, and we're staying on Zoom.
Yeah, and I think that's a very brave decision, and a very good decision too, because I'd back you 100% in that. I think, for instance, unlike you, Philippa, I am not a techie person. And our producer here, Maura O'Brien, I'm sure when you said that, just give me technology, I love it. I'm sure Maura wants to go to play with you, because Maura is our expert when it comes to everything technical and technological. She's a wizard at that too. But I would think that your founding president, Antonia, she must have been delighted that she had someone like you who could help her along with the Zoom and point out some of the issues that you might have.
But she's never needed my Zoom skills. We've always had more experienced Zoom masters, and we've got a brilliant one at the moment. So, I can always step in and muddle my way through when a bit of support's needed.
But I think you're putting yourself down one day. I'm not saying you're muddling through. It's not just a muddler you are. I think we'll have to put you down as one of those experts that we read about earlier on, about remaining humble and learning every day, because you've demonstrated that admirably today, the qualities that you have.
Yes, I was listening to you, and I think those experts who aren't humble are actually former experts who are really afraid that they'll be shown up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for validating what my thoughts were, because Paul would never do it as eloquently as you just put it there, Philippa. Thank you so much for that. And you obviously were somebody that was proficient with, or were you proficient with Zoom even before we were thrown into it at the deep end?
I hadn't even heard of Zoom before we were all thrown onto it.
Right.
But as Zoom worked 2 years ago, you could just fire it up and work it out on the hoof. It wasn't until a few weeks ago when I was Zoom master, when I had to stand in at short notice, I thought, oh, what's this putting people in focus?
Mm.
And then 2 weeks ago, I rehearsed my speech on my own copy of Zoom. It's really handy, everybody. Fire up a meeting, talk to yourself on Zoom, and then you can check it out afterwards. Great way to practice. Except the whiteboard works differently between your own personal version and the pro version we use at our club. So
That's a fantastic piece of advice, and I think that's a very good idea. I've been threatening to do it for a while, just have my own meeting with myself and practice the speech. But that's an interesting one you told us about the whiteboard. Can you give us another little bit of explanation on that?
No, I think we've run out of time. Try it.
I'll try that, yeah. And if I do get into trouble, I know where to go for the answer.
I got into trouble live in a meeting, so...
Well done, Philippa, and thank you for being a wonderful guest on the Talk Show for Talkers today. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And in fact, Philippa, we might have the opportunity in episode 4 to continue this conversation with regards the whiteboard and some of the other little intricacies, or those very tasty morsels that are in Zoom that some of us don't know about. So, Philippa, it's been a pleasure. And thank you for being such a fabulous guest on the Talk Show for Talkers. And you're going to have to come back tomorrow, listeners, to listen to the dulcet tones of Paul O'Mahony, because Paul is going to be bringing you something very special. He's going to be talking about speech contests. And again, it's either Zoom or in person. And I'm getting the waves from Paul, so Mara can cut that out. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.
Ted,
hang on. You haven't had a chance to look in the WhatsApp group. So the what I'm talking about is going to be 2 different types of club meetings.
Oh, sorry, Paul, I got mixed. I must have been looking at last week's one, was I? No, I wasn't actually.
Well, it doesn't matter. But if you like to do a different ending there, so
yes,
that you...
please.
Okay, yeah.
Just hold on 1 second.
Okay, I'll just do the new, the next...
Hush for a second.
And him getting the waves.
So,
be bringing you something very special. He's going to be talking about speech content, because Paul O'Mahony.
Oh dear, well, how far do we go?
For being such a fabulous guest on the Talk Show for Talkers.
Okay, got it.
Do you want me to go through the whole outro, Mara?
Yes, please. Yeah, because I'm deleting I'm deleting the whole bit.
All right.
Because it was all rubbish.
It
was. I don't pull any punches, you see, Philippa.
No, that's grand.
Right, 3, 2, 1, go.
And I hope you all enjoyed some of those fantastic ideas by Philippa Gray. And I hope you'll be back tomorrow to listen to Paul O'Mahony, because Paul is going to be speaking about 2 types of innovative club meetings to try. That should be interesting. See you then. Bye.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I hope my dog didn't detract from the experience.
Don't think I heard it, but then...
I didn't hear him either, Paul.
No.
Okay, good.
I'm getting some hiss from somebody. I don't know who. Can we mute selectively. Okay, is Ted.
I was actually muted, Mara.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I know. And no, unmute. I've unmuted you. The hiss is coming from you, Ted.
Is it?
Just so that you know, yeah.
But could that be the light I'm using?
Strangely, the hiss goes when you start speaking.
Right.
It's when you're not speaking that it's hissing.
I'll just turn off this light here and see what happens.
No difference.
No difference. It must be coming from the Logitech camera, so the webcam.
Yeah, it's strange. When I'm talking, well, no, it would, of course, it cuts you out. Yeah. Hold on, just don't do anything. Yeah, it's definitely you. As soon as I mute you, the noise goes. But don't worry, it's not too insistent.
No, I can't hear it here, and I turned off the light, so it wasn't that. But there's still plenty of light coming in the window anyhow.
Yeah. Okay, let's press ahead.
Crack on to episode 4, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to unmute you, Paul. Okay. Right. Episode 4. Oh. Paul's disappeared. Thank you, Paul.
Well, it is episode 4 where Paul and I will be speaking with Philippa again about our expertise.
We're going into episode 4. Okay, no problem. No problem. Episode 4.
Ted, I have a couple of things I already want to talk to Philippa about. Okay,
that's great.
Okay, so Ted, you'll bring us in. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to episode 4 of this week's podcast on the Talk Show for Talkers. You're very welcome. And as I mentioned 2 days ago, we have the pleasure of our guest this week coming back to speak to us again about our adventures as a Toastmaster. And I was intrigued when she spoke about the whiteboard on Zoom. Philippa, would you explain that to me and our listeners, the advantages or the disadvantages indeed of using a whiteboard on Zoom?
It's not so much the disadvantages, but I have a personal account which comes with a very simple whiteboard which you can share in a meeting. And it didn't occur to me until it was too late that our club uses a pro account with a lot more features, lots of clever stuff. And I found out live in a meeting, I was actually doing quite a challenging speech, the one where you demonstrate you can deal with a difficult audience because people have been primed to interrupt you. And the advice was use a whiteboard to capture what the audience is saying so you can park people's ideas and persuade them not to interrupt you. So there I was talking away with the whiteboard, and I was interrupted, and I suggested that somebody used it as per the advice from Toastmasters, and the share didn't work, and they couldn't use it, and the only pen I could find was labelled disappearing pen. So I started using this pen myself, taking dictation, and guess what? The mark you put on the whiteboard disappears within seconds. What is the point of a disappearing pen? I was live making a speech, holding the speech in my head, remembering all the other different types of interruptions and the way I was supposed to deal with those that were all coming my way. And the pen started disappearing. At that point, I gave up, and I got a lot of very useful feedback, but telling me I should have rehearsed when I knew that, and I had rehearsed, and it really hadn't helped. So life is full of surprises.
Oh, that's brilliant, yeah. And I think was this Forrest Gump said that life is like a box of chocolates. It's full of surprises. No, that was brilliant. I found that very amusing there, and the thought went through my head, Philippa. You could certainly do a serious speech about that particular episode, but you could also do a humorous speech about it. And all you had to do was put on your magician's hat and say, "No, I want to show you disappearing whiteboard, and even the stuff that goes on the whiteboard will disappear." That's a fantastic story. Great story.
Yeah.
And Paul, you had something that you wished to ask Philippa coming out of our interview on day 2. Ubiquitously, Paul, you are muted.
Philippa, it's been wonderful to listen to you talking with Ted and talking about your experience in Toastmasters and how you found it and how you're hoping to find it. Tell me, before you joined Toastmasters at all, what were you doing? What's your job? What on earth? Why was Toastmasters relevant to you?
Right. Before I retired, I worked in IT for 30 years. So I retired. I haven't mentioned this to you before, Paul, but I've got some political ambitions. And of course, obvious need to make speeches. And having worked in IT for 30 years, I knew, just don't tell anybody how nervous you are about making speeches and how happy you are. There aren't any local hustings to cope with. But people involved in politics, they'd been advised to join Toastmasters, and they told me, and I thought, yeah, I really need this. So I haven't yet succeeded in getting myself elected, but I still have hopes, and I'm finding, learning, practicing speeches really helpful.
And the ability, of course, to improve your ability to respond intuitively, off the cuff, with confidence. Toastmasters is pretty good for that, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's brilliant for that. And as you said, it's a comfortable place that you can try things out in a friendly atmosphere and then take them into the real world.
I can see the connection between somebody who has, let's say, political ambitions, which are by definition leadership ambitions, and somebody who becomes a member of the club committee, let's say. And to what extent has being on the club committee in Shilling Club helped you so far with your being a leader in other areas?
Generally, it's just broadened my experience of a way to run a community group, which we are. I mean, it's a worldwide community. It's a community of common interests rather than restricted to one geography, as I explained before. But yeah, it just broadens your experience. You learn to work with people. You learn how to push their buttons, how to persuade them, how not to persuade them. And it's all, you just add it in there and use it. Say it.
You must have brought a lot of abilities to do that already developed into Toastmasters when you became a member.
Yeah, I had been involved in our local community centre for a few years. I'd got all the finance skills. I keep trying to tell the world, doing club accounts, you get a primary school kid to do it. You just need to be able to add up and check your numbers. So that is fairly straightforward. Again, I've been secretary of other organisations, and fortunately I'm getting faster at it and slicker at it the more I do it. So that's great. And I really love being at the centre of things, being on committees, understanding how a club is working, what keeps an organisation on the rails.
I think you love doing a lot of things, is the impression I'm building up. And I remembering Ted saying yesterday when he was talking, or the day before when he was talking with you, that he'd love to hear more about the new podcast from Shilling Club. I know that you volunteered to become a podcaster, to become what we could call a talent, to be a co-presenter of your club's podcast. Tell us about what went through your mind when just at the point where you decided, I'm going to do this.
I just thought that is going to be so exciting and such a useful skill to have. I'm involved, as I said, involved in the local community. I'm forever looking at free ways to create publicity. Publicity is a skill I've had to learn from scratch. I'm still learning, but it is absolutely essential to getting things done in the community. So I thought, yes, let's go for it. One of the first things I learned in Toastmasters was I thought I joined so I got over my nervousness about speaking in public. Very quickly, I learned so many techniques and so many things to think about. The nerves just evaporated. So I lost all fear of public speaking very quickly, and anything like podcasting, I know, practice it, do it for real, and then I've got a skill that means I can do it again in other situations, and I'm going to be able to do it quickly. So I'm forever taking on too much, but I get faster and faster at it.
So, and I'd like to come in there, Philippa. One of the qualities that I've recognised in you straight away is a beautiful quality. This one of volunteering to help your community. That's a fantastic quality to have. And, you know, they often say that they can't pay you for voluntary work. If they paid you for it, you wouldn't get the satisfaction out of it that you actually do get, because you obviously spend a lot of your time doing voluntary work, such as the community centre and taking on roles as secretary in different associations. That's a fantastic quality to have.
Yes, thank you, Ted. But it's also a lot of fun and very satisfying.
Oh, that's beautiful to be able to say that. And, you know, when you are doing voluntary work, even from the point of view of, if you think about it, as members of Toastmasters clubs, we're all doing voluntary work from that point of view. And I've been in it now since 2008. And it must mean that I'm getting something out of it, because who'd stay in an organisation for 13 or 14 years and they're not? People often say to me, God, how did you spend that much time in a voluntary organisation? But I just love it. And the people that we meet and the people that I get to speak with, such as you, it really is a golden nugget. It's a treasure trove. And you will find this in your career as a podcaster as well.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for that encouragement.
Yeah, and thank you, Philippa, again for being a wonderful guest this week. And Paul and I, and I'm speaking on Paul's behalf, we really enjoyed having that conversation with you about you, actually, about Philippa Gray, the person. So thank you very much for that. And I hope you'll all come back to us again next week, because we hope to have another very interesting guest.
Are we not going to have our usual close down?
No, Mara, sorry about that.
And
no,
you're also...
I was getting this from Paul, and I could see you, and I was saying, did somebody get...
No, can't you see it's still a yellow? It's not a red yet.
I can see that. That. But Paul wanted us to call it tonight.
Oh, Paul wants to go, yeah.
The complication is I have to leave.
Sure.
Exactly.
Apologies, Paul. I forgot about that. Okay, well, we'll do that later then. That's okay. Yeah. We can do that when Paul's gone. Let me just quickly move this out of the way.
Okay.
Philip, are you okay? Do you want to stay for the next 10 minutes?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, because...
Delighted.
If you want.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Philippa. Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Okay, Ted, we're ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome, Toastmasters, would-be Toastmasters listeners and friends. You are now listening to episode 3 of the Talk Show for Talkers on this week's show. And it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Paul O'Mahony, and Paul is going to be telling us or talking to us about, I'm going to look at my notes here now. In fact, Paul, you go ahead and tell us what your episode is about. 2 types of club meetings. Go ahead, sir.
2 types of club meetings, listeners, you might like to consider. But let's start at first principles. The most important thing about a speech or any communications is the content. Are we agreed about that? Certainly the people who designed the criteria for speech contests in Toastmasters International subscribe to that point of view. Content of a speech is the biggest single element by quite a long shot. At normal Toast, I'm going to talk about a type of Toastmasters meeting which will help you to become a lot better at having superb content. First of all the gestures and props that you use in a speech are a complete distraction from your content. That's my opinion. And by far the most important thing is to make sure that you've got your content good, because the standard of your speech is limited by the standard of your content. Now, we have a wonderful opportunity using Zoom to get rid of the distractions of all visual aids. The biggest visual aid on a stage or on Zoom is the speaker. Their face, their eyes, their expressions, they're all distractions from the content. And it's hardly surprising that so many evaluations in Toastmasters that I've heard, perhaps unrepresentatively, are about your position on the screen, your gestures, the look on your face. Not so many, in my experience, are about the content. So here's an idea. How about holding a very different type of club meeting at which the speakers who are going to be evaluated are all have their screens turned off, so that the evaluators can do nothing at all except listen to the content of the speech. Yes, and hear the vocal variety. That's all. They can listen, they can shut their eyes, and they can listen intently. And then the only thing an evaluator is able to comment on, the only recommendations an evaluator can give, and the only commendations an evaluator can give, is about the speech content and the vocal variety. That's all. When you listen to the radio and you have a favorite radio program, you can't see the person. All you have is the sound. What about that? There's my first suggestion as something to try out. Every now and again, by accident, somebody comes to a Toastmasters Club meeting and their visual, their image fails. They are cut off because of connection problems, but they're still able to make a speech. Of course, you won't win a Toastmasters speech contest, because part of the quality of the communication is going to be, in any situation, it is the visual side. Let's not deny that. But tone of voice, pace of voice matter. But even more important is what you're actually saying to people. How many speeches have you heard in which your attention wasn't held by the content of the speech? It was held by the gestures, the look on the person's face, the way they use props, and all of the rather flamboyant stuff. So there's first type of meeting I'm suggesting you might like to try in your club. And get in touch with us here on the Talk Show for Talkers and report back We'd love to hear from you on that experiment. Now, here's the second one. Here's the easiest type of club meeting to arrange, and it's called a speechathon. And it's so simple to arrange, because really, if you get down to it, you only need 2 people from the club, 2 members to be present in order to run a speechathon. Let's talk about how to do it with the absolute minimum, because you can run this as an extra club meeting and all your members might not want to be present at it. Imagine a club, we'll say hypothetically Blarney Club, decides we're going to run a speechathon, and we're going to run it to allow our own members and members from other places to do a speech in order to progress their educational practice and learning within our education system. What do you need? Well, you definitely need a club president, don't you? You definitely need a club president. But the club president can double job, can't they? They can also be the Toastmaster. So you now have an MC, no problem. You have to have a timer. Absolutely essential to have a timer. You don't have to have a grammarian, an accounter. You don't have to have anybody else. You need some speakers, of course, otherwise there wouldn't be a speechathon. However, let's imagine you attract 8, even 10 speakers. Can't they evaluate each other? So there's the trick, you see. Each of the speakers can make a speech and evaluate somebody else. Perfect for credit within the Pathways educational system. Great publicity for the club, because if the visitors come from outside to do their speech at your club, think about how much they're going to appreciate. But also your own members. Now you can even do a speechathon because you only need 2 people, and you can even swap the timer in the middle of the time, and you can also swap the Toastmaster, can't you, in the middle of the time available. You could run a speechathon for 6 hours. You could have 3 teams of 2. You could run a speechathon in which every single speaker who wants to make a speech in your area, in your club, in your area, in your division, you could organize something big ever so easily, because all you need are 2 people from the club. And frankly, if you couldn't get a timer from the club, couldn't one of the speakers who's come to be in the speechathon be the timer? Easiest meeting in the whole world to have. It's a little bit of thinking outside the box. Everybody gets what they do evaluated. Everybody gets credit. Fantastic photographs, screenshots, fantastic write-up. It'd be a good idea to get a public relations person to be keeping notes, to write a great post on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, your blog. So there you are. 2 new types of meetings, perhaps in the dark meetings and speechathon. Tell us about your speechathons. We'd love to publicize them. With that, I'd like to hand back to Ted Melanphy to wish you all the best and tell us what is on the agenda for tomorrow. Thank you.
And thank you, Paul. I just want to give one comment about the speechathon. I always felt that speechathon was based on marathon. And the reason I say this is that I love your concept, and that's a new way of doing it. And thank you very much, Paul. And I know you're flying out the door now on another arrangement that you have. But we did a speechathon in Blarney Toastmasters in 2015, and it went on for 24 hours. And it wasn't as if then we could have used Zoom. So you'll appreciate this as well, Philippa. we didn't have Zoom at the time. Maybe we did, but we didn't realise it. So it was only all local clubs. And what we did was we got all the clubs locally to sign up for a 2-hour session and run their own meetings. And what it was actually, we used it as a fundraiser for the children's cancer ward in our local hospital. And we made a significant amount of money out of that speechathon. And I'm sure that going along with what Paul was speaking about, there might be an opportunity for clubs here to collect funds for a worthy cause within their own areas. Philippa, what would you have thought about that?
I think that's a great idea, Ted. Yes, got me thinking.
Good.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun and a great opportunity to create funds for organisations that badly need funds. Because no matter how wealthy you think the country is, there's always going to be, particularly cancer wards, for children, or you might be just raising money for the local dog's home or the cat's home or some worthy charity that could badly do with funds, particularly since we're all coming out of COVID now, and the amount of money that was going to charity was probably hit by the fact that you didn't have footfall inside in our cities and towns, or restaurants and bars were closed, so all these little opportunity points for gathering money weren't there. So we'll sign off with that, and that brings us to the conclusion of episode 3. And I know we will hear you and see you all again tomorrow, and we're going to be carrying on the conversation, Paul and I, with our very special guest, Philippa Gray, a member of Shilling Speakers, secretary and treasurer, taking on big roles, and co-presenter of the Shilling Speakers podcast show. So come back for that, and we'll see you tomorrow. Philippa, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show, and thank you for being such a wonderful guest.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks for being a great host. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. And the way you run your podcast, can you just tell us what is it? Is it for an hour? Is it for 2 hours? Or what's the length of time, and what's the kind of content, and what sections have you got within the show?
We are feeling our way in. We've recorded our first episode, which was spontaneous, and we are going to let it find its own style, its own pace, and
lovely.
Its own audience, we hope.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, so you'll be certainly marketing to your own area and your own, the Shilling Toastmasters. But will you try and, what about District 91? Have you got an official podcast?
I don't know. I should know, shouldn't I? I will find out. And yes, we'll certainly let District 91 know all about it.
Yeah, well, that's because there's the opportunity, because we started this show in 2014, and the only reason this show started in 2014 is that I'm a member of a business networking group, and I can remember in 2014 this lady came into our meeting, and her name was Anya Barry, and she stood up and she says, I run a radio show, and we have different characters on it every week, and it's very successful. And it was being aired on Irish Radio International. It was universal. It was international. It went all over the world as a radio show. And of course, Ted was there as a Toastmaster, and I went over and I said, I'd love to come on that show and do a piece about what Toastmasters is all about. And here we are now, and we used to meet, as we do now. We met every week inside in the Irish Radio International's offices, and we used to do the show, and we used to record on Thursday, and it went out on Friday. But now it's after morphing into where we have 4 segments. We had 4 segments then as well. But what happens now is that we put each segment out starting Friday, then Saturday, then Sunday, then Monday, which makes it kind of bite-sized chunks that people can just have without having to be staying there for an hour to listen to the whole lot.
Yes, it's a good idea.
So how many sections are there in your podcast? Or segments?
We recorded it as one, but
Okay.
Paul was thinking actually it would split naturally into two smaller halves. So
Okay,
I'm not sure what he has done. I mean, he's only had 24 hours to work on it. So
Right. And what's your co-presenter's name?
there's me and Paul and Pat Caslin.
Oh, so Pat is superb. We know Pat, yeah. And Pat is well into that. So there's three of you there. So is Pat Caslin the man in the background doing what Mara does for us?
No, all three of us are in the foreground.
Oh, well done. Excellent.
Paul did the technical work.
Well, you're after starting something now that will just grow and grow and grow.
That's a great thought.
Yeah, and you'll enjoy it. And what you'll probably have the opportunity to interview some of those politicians that you aspire to yourself. It's quite possible you'll get them to come on your show and discuss politics or the local politics. And before we know it, you'll be running for a role yourself, because you'll get your own name out there as well, Philippa. Just imagine that.
Yeah.
And now we'd like to announce the new Prime Minister of Ireland. Sorry, beg your pardon, of England. So best of luck to you in your career now as a podcaster, because you'll have great fun out of it.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, it's been a great start.
Yeah, and thank you for being, as I said, a great guest today. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Right, yes, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks, Philippa. That's great. And that's the whole purpose. If you don't enjoy it, it's not worth it, you know.
Let's say goodbye to
So I'm going to sign
YouTube.
off, ladies.
We'll say goodbye to YouTube, and we'll end the stream.
The people who are watching us on YouTube.
So bye-bye, YouTube. See you.